interesting ideas on your side. So a bit about me. Again, my name is Justin Lokitz. I live in San Francisco. So what you're seeing right now, by the way, with the sunlight in, is because I found a new spot in my home so that I can look outside all the time. That's in my attic, away from my wife, who's somewhere else. But I love being outside. So when I'm not doing what I'm doing here, you can always find me outside. I've worked for a lot of big companies before I'm doing and started doing what I do today. So I've worked for companies of all different sizes. Sort of cut my teeth in the tech industry, working for a long time at Oracle, doing everything you could possibly imagine, from sales engineering to software engineering to consulting. I moved out of there and went through some startups that were eaten by other startups that were eaten by other startups that were eaten by other startups, and eventually eaten by giant Swedish holding companies like Hexagon, where I stayed for a little bit. And then left there and went to Autodesk, where I did mostly product management and product strategy, where I really started to do a lot more of what I do today. Today, I run something called BMI, or Business Models Inc. I run the US version of that. And we're a small global company. So I just run the US version, but I've got a lot of really great partners all over the world doing this. And what we do is we help to redesign businesses, and really of all different shapes and sizes, but primarily businesses that really need help in doing something and shifting that business so that they don't die, right? And this all comes about not bringing in a big brain or something like that. Mine's certainly not that big. But it's about actually co-creating with teams to make something bigger, to make something, meatier, to create something that can actually change inside of a company. And you'll see I'll end with a lot of that. The kinds of companies are these. It's not just these. Certainly there are lots of startups and scale ups and other things in between, but it's mostly large multinational companies that if they don't change, they often are dying. In the midst of all this, also, I've written some books and co-authored some books. One's called Design a Better Business. Our company we're the producer of something called Business Model Generation. And as Eddie mentioned, what I'm doing here today is also in concert with a book that we just finished the other day and should be published this fall, called Business Model Shifts. There should be an S at the end of that. Our publisher forgot about that part, but that'll be coming out this fall. And that's a lot of what I'm talking about today. So today is framed about, it's really why, what, and how. And by the end, we'll get back to sort of where I started here with the how and the co-creation piece. So why then, why are shifts, why are the things that I'm talking about today so relevant? Well, business as usual is dead. And this isn't a slide that I've just started using since our most recent lockdown. In fact, it's something I talk about all of the time, right? Every day we see dead companies really popping up to the surface and then floating back down as detritus. And today it just happens to be way more prevalent than any other day. In fact, this came out the other day. There's an artist out there, you can see his name at the bottom, a designer, and he came out with these new logos that have come about since COVID-19 lockdown. And you can sort of glance over them. Well, in many ways, while these companies certainly aren't dead yet, their current business models and the way they're working definitely, or the way they were working before COVID-19, definitely don't work the same today. And you can sort of glance over these. It's definitely true, right? We can see this. And this isn't just a lockdown COVID-19 thing. This is an everyday thing. And that's because change is really accelerating. Change is exponential. And in that change, we're seeing lots of shifts. We're seeing the global center of gravity shifting from the West, where we believe we're the best and the most innovative, whether it's Europe or the US or Canada, to the East in India. And we see these other places around the world picking up really interesting ideas and business models and running with them and doing something totally different in many cases. But also, they're not just doing that because it's a fun thing to do. It's also, in many cases, they're empowering customers because customers are demanding to be empowered, and not just consumers, but customers, right? Everyone. And in many cases, we're empowered to do things by ourselves that we weren't empowered to do yesterday, whether it's legal support from expensive lawyers to something like Rocket Lawyer, in mobility, from owning cars to things like this, paying for some kind of mobility when we need it, right? In shopping, certainly this is a true one, from physical stores to 24/7 and even having things delivered not just to our doorstep, but into our actual homes, right? And even like things like but I want this like right now. And you see here is a Chinese website where there's a divorce button, right? So there's lots of these things happening. But on top of that and all this change, technology is omnipresent. It is everywhere, and it is also compounding. So it's not like one technology is going to rule them all. We're going to see really interesting network effects of technology compounding on other technologies. And so it's everywhere and hidden. And we see things like this. I'm sure everyone here thinks about this and as part of their products or reads the news about artificial intelligence. Well, it's not just about artificial intelligence changing. When you get that change paired with things like blockchain, other technologies, or nanotech, or whatever it is that you think is going to be some really interesting exponential technology, everything changes for us and new business models start to crop up and change our world. But it is also isn't just about technology change, right? We must find ways to solve other problems that aren't just our everyday customer problems, but global problems where we're taking from the forest, we're making things in the factories, right? We then throw them away when we no longer need them and perhaps even set those things on fire. So all of these things are about change. And when we think about business model shifts, there are reasons why we shift business models. Well, it's to deal with this change. So what can we then do about all this stuff? Well, this is a fun little graphic that my creative director Martin drew, really sketched out really quickly. When we think about what we do today, or maybe what we did yesterday, and the very edge of innovation, the very edge of what we can even imagine possible, everything then we're talking about in shifting business models, this is what we can do today. We can start to shift towards that edge, and that edge keeps moving out, but we can continue to shift over and over and over throughout time, our businesses of all different sizes and shapes, to actually always try to reach that goal of that edge. And this is also potentially where the value is being created in the future. And it's also about how we're solving big problems along the way before those things become giant problems. So then what we're talking about today and these changes, I'm going to call them business model shifts. And in today, while this is not a business model canvas or a tool webinar, I am going to use a tool called a business model canvas to describe these things. I'm not going to describe the tool in depth, but if you know it, that's great. If you don't, you get to me afterwards and I'm certainly happy to send you some links. And I'll also have some links about it at the end of this where you can read and listen and watch YouTube videos about more of this. So the business model shifts that I'm talking about, there's 6 of them. And these are the 6 that we've identified in our book and have done a deep dive on each one with a bunch of exploratory case studies and patterns that are happening in the world where you see some really interesting things going on that are things that might be really interesting to you and your company about how you might also start to shift your business model and strategy. The first of those is something we're calling pipeline to platform. Imagine this. Apple of 30 years ago was a very different company than it is today. It's a pretty simple one, right? Apple manufactured and sold computers and software, and that's all it did. It manufactured computers and software and then sold those to people. It was a pipeline straight through. Today, however, if you look behind the scenes, you look at Apple's earnings reports, it turns out Apple of the future is going to make its money not from developing computers and maybe even electronics for that matter, but only does so to create platforms, to create engagement on its own platform to allow others to exchange value on Apple's behalf. And you can think about this as apps. Apps is a platform, or news, or books, or music, or movies with Apple Plus, right? These are platform plays, and Apple slowly moved away, or maybe quickly in some cases, moved away from developing products and selling them to us to this platform approach where it brings multiple stakeholders together to actually start exchanging value. It's also then about physical to digital, right? And we see this every day. Disney is a similar company to Apple where it's done the same thing forever and done something really, really unique in delivering experiences. But what you might not know is that in all those physical experiences, Disney has been shifting to digital experiences, not just so that we can do them in our homes, but so that Disney can find better ways to engage with us throughout the life cycle, so that it doesn't just have to create something physical and hope for the best, but so how it can actually connect its customers back to the company and do a lot more online with us and over time with us than it could do otherwise. And this is one called My Magic, the My Magic Plus. This is a wristband, and it's a whole ecosystem that happens inside of its resorts and inside of its parks, but also starts to happen outside of its parks. There are also business model shifts like shareholder to stakeholder, where instead of focusing just on our shareholders and their needs and building the business and building profits and dividends over time, we focus on everyone in the world. In fact, we might focus on the globe in general. And here you're seeing Unilever doing exactly that. And in Unilever's case, Unilever has decided to stop putting out quarterly reports and trumping up all of its earnings and everything to sort of show its shareholders how well it's doing. In fact, it's decided to do it just for the globe, to do it for the world, and it's got all these 17 different initiatives to do that. And in doing so, this company believes by focusing on stakeholders and everyone being those stakeholders, the company will not only do better for the world and all of its stakeholders, but also for its shareholders. So this is another business model shift. And don't worry, I'm going to get deep into one of these because I want to show you what it's all about. There's also another business model shift called singular to circular. And it's very much in line with some of the other ones I just mentioned. Imagine today when you buy a pair of Nikes from the store, what you end up getting is a pair of shoes. And then what happens? You wear those shoes, you wear them out, maybe you throw them away, maybe you put them in the donation box for someone else. Well, in a true circular model, like something called Nike Grind, which you may not know about, and now you do, Nike has actually created an entire supply chain that's not just about getting things in a singular way straight to its customers like us, but also has created a business model that takes those things back, grinds them down to their constituent parts so that they can be used again, either in shoes or something else. And so in this circular business model, it's now actually extracting, mining value out of things it's already created, mining value, remining value over and over and over to bring those things back and create new value out of those things. So it isn't now just about the environment, but it's actually about creating value, exchanging value, capturing old value, creating value again, and exchanging value in this circular pattern. There's also another shift called linear to exponential. And linear to exponential, again, this sort of builds off of all of these things. Linear to exponential is about not just going with this product service mindset and delivering one thing, but actually growing the company exponentially by putting lots of things in place that actually allow that business model to grow exponentially on its own. I think a really good one is Netflix. Now, Netflix is certainly a newer company in all of these, right? It hasn't been around as long. In fact, it was built very much so originally as an exponential company. But if you can think about where Netflix started in sending DVDs to us and where it is today, when you turn on Netflix and it actually kind of has an idea of what you might want to watch, and everyone's Netflix looks different, that's exponential. Netflix has created a whole mode where the company grows over and over and over without really doing very much other than finding new titles to put on the site all the time and on their service all the time. And actually, they've created a bunch of levers internally and mostly in its key resources that allow it to be exponential in growth. And then finally, the last one of these 6 different shifts is something called from products to services. And this is one I want to spend a little bit more time on because I think this one's really relevant for right here, right now. And it goes along with all the others. Product to service is exactly what you think it is. It's basically, how can we go from this mindset where we're actually delivering a product where I buy a yellow water bottle because I believe as a customer I need the yellow water bottle, or because the company who's selling me this yellow water bottle believes I need the yellow water bottle, to a place where it's not that I need the water bottle, I just need a service that hydrates me. Right? That's product to service, and it's doing jobs for customers that they need done and doing it really well. And so, for instance, Philips has done this recently. and something called Philips Signify, and it's lighting as a service. Philips realized, and they, alongside a big time architect, realized that the job of people is not to buy light bulbs. Like none of us care to buy a light bulb. We just want light. And so Philips actually has a whole business model approach to delivering you light, which means it manages your light bulbs and light fixtures, mostly in this case for commercial entities. BMW also has figured out that people are buying less cars. It's true. While there are more cars on the road than ever, in fact, per capita, it turns out in most of the places that BMW is really, really popular, car sales are actually going down. And so it's looking to the future to provide access to vehicles and not the vehicles themselves. And even denim, jeans as a service. There's a Dutch company called Mud or MUD, right? And in fact, this company is offering denim as a service. You might actually rent or lease denim from this company, return them when you're done. They fix them up and give them to the next person. So you're always in style and you never actually have to buy another pair of denim that wears out and that you end up throwing away or giving away. And in fact, I think this is so important. This as a service model is so important that it's not just me saying it. In fact, we see where we are today. This article just happened literally the other day. This article came out and it was it was really well read and it was relatively well written too. And the idea is pretty salient, which is, hey, we're in this specific time where we're all locked in our houses, and so are as business people, we're locked into our houses doing business, and as consumers, we're locked in our houses as consumers, and we're having to do everything as a service because, well, we can't go out there and do the physical things we used to do. And very likely, while many of us will go back to the office if we haven't already, and we might go back to the same shops, very likely many of the things that we expect today in where we are in this pandemic world, we're going to continue to expect in this post-pandemic world. And this is about service, and this is basically a service business model shift. So what does this look like, and how can you think through these business model shifts? So I wanted to dive into just this one, because it would take too much time to dive into all of them, but I want to dive into this one to show you what that might look like. And I'm going to do so by giving you an idea of what one specific company is doing in this. And it's not just that they started doing it because of COVID-19. In fact, this company started doing it way before COVID-19. It's a company called Medtronic. And if you don't know Medtronic, it sells, well, it doesn't even really sell anymore. It provides medical equipment and devices. So everything from pacemakers to to ventilators, to all kinds of different heart surgery equipment, and you name it, it probably provides, the state of the art equipment to doing that. And so I'm going to describe then what Medtronic used to do, and I'm going to show you then the shift that Medtronic has made as a company. So yesteryear, in some, years past, the way Medtronic thought about itself and the way its founders thought and its leadership team thought about the company was that it provided as value propositions, life-changing high-end products, right? And so you can think about these things as ventilators and other hard equipment, as well as the tools and resources to actually manage those things and to fix them or whatever. Its customers were basically healthcare professionals, right? And so it would sell this to the surgeons and the people at the hospital, and of course, indirectly to the patients who needed these. It would actually mostly build relationships one-on-one and would sort of build something like a partnership with the healthcare providers and professionals to get this all done. And of course, the company has always been about relieving pain, restoring health, extending life, and all those things. And that's been an essential part of its customer relationship. And as you can imagine, it was a product company, right? So yesteryear, it was a product company. It basically sold these devices to hospitals, to healthcare professionals, so that they can do their jobs of maintaining life, relieving pain, and all those other things. To do this, of course, it had key resources like big factories, and forever it was engineering, designing, and producing products. Its partners were health authorities and payers and patient organizations, you name it, right? There were a bunch of different key partners in this whole thing. And then it spent a ton of money and its costs on innovation, people, marketing, and sales, and everything else. Very typical product company, really successful in this business model. However, A few years ago, the same company turned around and thought, you know what, this is all great, but we're fighting an uphill battle because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to partner with these healthcare professionals to provide better outcomes, better livelihoods, better life for the patients. But when we sell a product and we sort of back away slowly, we don't really know if that's the truth. We don't know how that works. And certainly in this competitive landscape, are we sure we're doing the best we can here? And so a few years ago, Medtronic changed from a product business model to a service business model. Now let's think through this. I put this in here because I think it's a really interesting business model. What does it mean to have a service centric business model as a medical device company? Well, the first thing that Medtronic did was it changed its value propositions. It isn't any longer about devices at all, right? It really is about operational performance, improving the patient experience, and then providing the set of services and devices that are needed to do that. Because it turns out that hospitals aren't just about actually, giving better care. They also have to do so with operational excellence. And so, what a better way than to have its equipment partners sign up for as part of that. So think about that enhanced performance as now is its key pillar value proposition. It also now turned around and said, while patients are certainly a big part of our business model, we really need to focus on the hospitals and the physicians because we're going to help them actually perform better and create better performance overall for the hospital. Its channels then are also case studies and referrals. So no longer actually does this company need to go out there and glad hand and sell and sell and sell device after device after device. In fact, what it does is it teams up with these physicians, with researchers, with the hospitals to create case studies about how it helps to create better performance overall. And what's really interesting then is that it's a real partnership here. And it's a partnership because the way that this business model is set up is there are no more selling of devices, selling of hardware. In fact, it's not even really leased. In fact, you get the hardware as a hospital and as a physician, you get the hardware and then you pay a fee per procedure, right? There's shared risk because also you're paying for the performance of that device. So it's really incumbent now on Medtronic to enable you to perform better, to enable better outcomes because it gets paid for better outcomes overall. It is really now a partner in this whole business model. And so its resources are also quite different. It isn't just about making better devices and R&D therein. It's about bringing in expertise and knowledge from the medical community to keep doing better and better and better and create better outcomes, whatever device there is. And the activities then are these. They're tailoring solutions. So it's not just about pumping out new products, it's tailoring solutions and offerings, and even running back office operating support rooms, right, where they're actually the operations in the back end to create better outcomes for the actual hospital healthcare providers and physicians. Its partners in this whole thing are really the device business that's actually making the devices to keep creating better and better and better, but also financiers so this company can actually put these devices in hospital with just a contract and not a big upfront sum of money. And of course, it means its cost structure is fundamentally changed as well. Right now, it actually is all about turning on and creating turnkey facilities and labs and managing the operating rooms and ICU beds and really actually spending time with experts in the hospitals to consult and help everything manage better. And why is all this? Well, this is because as a company, Medtronic shifted its business model to focus on the needs of its customers and the jobs these customers are trying to do rather than what it thought it was buying devices to make those jobs. Turns out physicians don't really care about the devices. Hospitals don't really care at all about the devices. They just care about better outcomes and better operations. And now Medtronic is a partner to help these customers do exactly that. So our point of view in all of this is that we must focus on providing customer job-centric services. And again, if we look at a business model, if we think about a typical business model, it's a product business model. This means We're going in our value propositions, right, from products with some margin focus to solving some job to be done with maybe better, higher quality performance. We're going from retail channels to we own the distribution as a company and we can manage that distribution because we still own the things, the devices or whatever is inside of these customers. We're going to long-term relationships. We're also going from some pay per unit to pay per use or pay per performance or something else, really teaming with our customers to get them the right things at the right time to help them do their jobs better. We're taking production facilities to data becomes a big part of this. It becomes a key resource. And of course, also from product, development and management and marketing to managing a fleet and the assets, but also to partners that share our unique point of view on this whole thing. But also we're going from materials to finance and people and accounting for the impacts overall. So this is an as a service business model, and these are ways that you might go about looking at your own business model and shifts. And I think what's important about these is there's lots of patterns that you can follow, right? It's about addressing jobs to be done and really keeping some value going. And it's about quality products, but really it's about quality things to help people get their jobs done and building relationships that have love as part of them, but also recurring revenue. But we also own the assets and also the experience that we are delivering on in that whole thing. Irrespective of all this, of course, you also, in order to create a shift, you must also understand how your current business model works. How your current business model works today, even from a high level, is going to change what you might do tomorrow in your own shift. And so that is a way of saying, if you want to use something like a business model canvas, that's a great way of doing it. So before I move on to the next section in the how, and this is the final section, I'd love to ask Eddie, do we have any questions yet about this?
I should unmute myself. We do have one that just popped in that is relevant to the Medtronic example that you gave us from Brian, who says, is there a conflict of interest if Medtronic is paid on usage while the hospitals want efficiency and simplicity?
Yeah, it's a great question. There would be, except that Medtronic isn't just paid on usage, it's actually paid on operational excellence. So the Medtronic's contracts are not just pay per, like put a coin in, use this thing. It's about performance. And so I think that even goes to pain management, death, and everything else. In fact, Medtronic sees itself and the hospitals see Medtronic as true partners. And it's sort of like, you don't pay unless Medtronic is able to relieve pain. Right. And so if Medtronic isn't able to relieve pain, then you're not paying for this thing. And so it's in Medtronic's best interest to help hospitals and physicians do that. So otherwise, yes, it would be probably a bit of a conflict, but the way that their contracts, as far as I know, are written, it's actually about no cure, no pay.
If you got a second, I'm going to throw a sort of a two-parter at you here.
Yeah, go for it.
Melissa just posted one that reminded me of another question that came up earlier. Melissa says, how sustainable is this relationship subscription model in a world where budgets are shifting drastically? Is there a risk of cancellation year to year? So she's addressing this idea that the market is always changing. And then the other one that came up from earlier is the Medtronic example you gave. It started thinking about this business model shift earlier. Is it too late for companies that want to start thinking about necessary shifts in their business models right now? So
great. Perfect. I'll start with the last one first. Never too late. You must, right? In this environment, you'll see this. Restaurants is an easy one. Movie theaters is another one, right? But think about restaurants. I live in San Francisco, and the restaurants that are still holding on, that haven't announced that they're going under for sure, are the ones that immediately move not just to delivery services like Grubhub and the rest, but actually move to providing some experience on a regular basis in a new, different way. There are some microbreweries that have done this. There's some restaurants that have done this, knowing that they have to actually, address customers' needs that isn't just food, but something else. And that's what restaurants aren't just about food, right? They're about community and experience. And that's why you go to a restaurant most of the time. So it's never too late. If you're not doing it, then you're dying. That's the end. That's the end of that answer. The second part is, is there a risk to these things sort of dying on the vine with reduced budgets and time shifting? Now, the key in all of this is that you must find the jobs that your customers need done that they cannot do themselves, and that aren't going to go away. These are real jobs. These are functional, social, emotional jobs that are really relevant and aren't going to go away. That's the only way that these kinds of business models work. Um, and so it doesn't matter what it is, right? Community might be one. Zoom is doing so well today, not because of business conferences and so forth. Zoom is doing just as well because we all have this intrinsic need for community, whether it's in business or social, right? And so that's a job we have to get done for ourselves. It's a social and emotional job. And that's why Zoom and Google and anyone else who's coming out with these things today. And so in Medtronic's case, there's not that big risk because it's also partnered with hospitals and physicians, because the jobs that hospitals and physicians do not only aren't going to go away, they're going to keep going, and they're going to be more and more and more. And Medtronic's put itself into place to be partners in creating that future for them. So even if there are new things that need to happen in some imagined future that can't be done today, Medtronic's going to be the first company there to do them because it's already a partner with its customers in actually co-developing these things and then seeing them in hospitals. So in fact, in many ways, I'd say this is like the fabled catbird seat, which is you have to guess what movie that's from as well. But the fabled catbird seat, which is this company sitting at the center of its customers and actually co-developing with them, not just the hardware, but the actual business models and the life cycle by which these things are part of. And it's to get jobs done.
There are a couple more questions coming in, but let's let you get
Yep.
your how portion. That's important, and we'll come
Great.
back to a couple more.
Perfect. So at the end of the day, how do we design these shifts, right? It's on one hand, certainly you can look at those business models that I built out, and I just built out one set of rich business models or semi high level business models. So that's part of it, but it's not just about envisioning these shifts and sort of seeing them on a wall and saying, oh yeah, there it is, we can do that. It actually takes a lot more. And I can tell you this is from experience, having failed at this internally at companies and now having succeeded a lot with a lot of big companies. And so what I want to give you is a sense that anyone can actually do this. And here are some of the steps, and here's some of the things you need to know in order to make these things happen. And by the way, when I say make these things happen, what I mean is not just shift once, but shift forever, continually shift and have this sort of shift mindset whereby you always see some future that you're shifting towards. So step one, there's 3 steps. You really do need to employ a design-led processes. And this certainly goes along with pragmatic marketing. I also went through pragmatic marketing now, 15 years ago, something like that, in classroom, of course. So pragmatic's also shifting its business model, as is the product leadership group, right? So you have to employ design-led processes. And the way I think about design is design-led processes isn't about going from, we have this idea and then we're going to go execute this idea and then we're going to scale it and keep going. It's all about, first and foremost, that at the center of everything is your point of view. And if you want to inform your point of view about what you might do next, the first thing you need to do is understand, well, the world, the context, your customers, but also understand your own business model. If you can do that, then it's about ideating, creating new opportunities, new options, not solutions, but new options for the future, and probably doing this with a group of people that may be very different, maybe don't even like each other, but actually are going to be able to come up with really interesting different options for some said future. Utilizing those options to then prototype and validate with your customers, thereby enhancing your point of view, and doing that enough times so that the point you actually come out with new solutions, new opportunities to engage, you've already actually done a lot of the work to de-risk these things. That's called design. But you also then want to scale design and scale this idea of innovation internally at your companies, at your organizations. Now, this certainly all starts with ambition, with a big vision, right? And so, what's your vision overall? What's your vision, not just for today, but what's your vision for some future? If you've got this vision, big vision, then what does your organization look like when it comes to innovation, when it comes to actually designing new solutions, getting out to customers? Who's actually doing what, and how do you actually organize your organization around design and around actually figuring out what problems are, what problems exist, and what opportunities exist way before they even exist? How do you then actually bring new capabilities and mindset to the people in this organization? So this is design skills, this is business modeling skills, this is pragmatic, right? Pragmatic management, marketing skills. It's every other skill that you might need to change the way you do things probably today. This might also include lots of different processes and tools than you utilize, like the business model canvas. This is one of innumerable tools that you can use to have the right strategic conversations at the right time and place. And so, how might you employ those with the capabilities and mindset to change what you do? It's also then applying different metrics to how you measure where things are and what things are going to get released into the world. And then, of course, how you fund those things appropriately. And so I think of this as sort of the innovation ecosystem that any organization needs to continue to shift forever. And of course, different organizations and where different organizations are and what their visions or ambitions are probably different too, aligned differently to how these organizations go out in the world and build some kind of growth, whether they're looking at existing or sort of brand new industries, right? It's transformational things. You might want to look at these things differently too. And finally, step three is creating this portfolio approach, not just to one business model, but thinking through everything your company does, but specifically all of the different business model options you might have on the table as a portfolio of shifts you might make over time. So I like to think about it as this business model maturity curve, wherein at some stages all you're doing is focused on value creation. You're focused on actually creating new value and testing new value even more so. And in other parts of your portfolio, you're focused on growth and growing the business. But these are very, very different things. And if I look at that business model canvas overlaid on this whole thing, well, then at some point, I'm thinking about learning and building and problem solving up front as part of that business model canvas. And later on, I'm thinking about growing and optimizing my operations to take care of that. If I'm thinking about all the business models that might exist inside of one company, and not even a big company, any company has probably a few different business models. What that also means is that I can actually put these business models, associate them inside of a portfolio so that I'm not actually taking a brand new idea, brand new business model, and comparing it to some business model that's been in existence for 5 years and has really been a big part of growing our company. Maybe I don't want to compare those two because one's so new. I can't really compare the metrics there. But so I can grow the business model portfolio and know where different things are at different stages so that I also know what I might need to do to them to get them to the next stage. Or maybe I need to throw some out so that I understand what I do need to focus on as part of that next stage. What this does for us is it systematically de-risks all of the bets we make in our company as part of our business model shifts. So, for instance, if I'm going to then apply metrics to something, I can say that I've got metrics that are helping me to understand the problems that I'm trying to solve, the solutions that I'm trying to build. I have metrics that probably is as part of that business model portfolio are about growth, and maybe even metrics that are also about execution and optimizing things. In between these things, perhaps then I have different gates that our products actually move through as product professionals and building different business model shifts that I'm actually now metricing things with gates that say, hey, if I don't meet this number of customers, I can't really move this to the next build gate and actually provide more access or resources or whatever, which means if I don't get there, I can't move to the viral coefficient or the profit and margin gate, right? And I can start building portfolios. So it's not just one shift we're trying to make. It's lots of different options for different kinds of shifts and different opportunities therein. And if I look at the whole curve, it looks something like this, right? It's not only about optimizing. At some point, maybe it's about amplifying. At some point, it's about sustaining the business. And at some point, it's about divesting of things and breaking things into their constituent parts so that I can maybe bringing back into the business. And in all this, then, it's also about applying the right funding approach. Right? This comes from HBR, from Harvard Business Review, where, it turns out that most of us invest in core products, but it turns out the return is only 10%, whereas the return in transformational things is often much, much, much more. And so when we look at it that way, we can also think about this portfolio approach as actually providing opportunities to do metered funding in this whole thing and fund things differently, fund our opportunities differently, so that we're not just going whole hog on one big opportunity, but we actually meter how we meter how we fund, meter how we provide different resources at different stage gates, right? So that we're always shifting, we're always giving ourselves opportunities to shift over time. And in that, actually being really honest with ourselves about what we're willing to provide, what we're willing to do in order to reach the next gate, and hopefully make some monumental shifts along the way. So that was really, really quick, 35 minutes actually after the preamble. I wanted to give you sort of a bit of the why, the what, and the how. Of course, the book has a lot more in it. And what we've talked about here are a lot, but we've certainly gone through, what does it mean? Why is it out there? What does it mean to shift? And how do we actually do these things? I want to end here, of course, but I do want to bring it back into questions. If you want to connect with me to sort of keep this conversation going, there's my LinkedIn, tons of case studies on my website, you can just go to YouTube and you can type in Business Models Inc. And you get lots of different ways to do this stuff. And just, here's some inspirational, but also educational content. And of course, if you want to pre-order my new book that's all about this, there it is. I've got a little bit.ly address for you. But Eddie, I'd love to open it up to questions if there are any, and take it from there.
There sure are. There's one that popped up that's about human resources.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that companies are people, right? If you have a product, analytics, in the case of Brent, who's asking the question, that makes employees of the customers more productive or effective, how do you make a switch to providing a service to achieve a task for the customer when the employees will feel like you're taking their jobs away, basically outsourcing what was their function? How should we think about sort of some of the collateral damage that is possible in a business shift like this?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, because I think it pulls on the tensions of the company's goal overall, right, which might be operational efficiency, and then the people inside of that company that are employed to provide it some operational efficiency. And now you're going to sell some product. I think, one way, and I think there are probably many ways to think through this, one way to start doing that shift would be to actually start going into these companies like Medtronic does, partnering with the company to test out this business model. So it isn't just selling them whole hog on a whole new approach, but testing it out. And in testing it out, finding other jobs, finding other unmet needs of, for instance, their employees, or operations that those employees are a part of, finding other unmet needs there that you can also then help with, and perhaps in some other way. And this is a way of thinking through continually shifting, which is eventually whatever you provide is going to be, there's going to be something else in some imagined future that's going to, totally eliminate that or come up with something new, or it's going to make something else in the same companies more efficient. And that's going to be the new shiny thing. And so, I'd say the opportunity then is not just to shift your business model and now sell the company on this new shift, but actually partner with the company to prototype what this might look like in maybe one part of the company first. And in doing so, getting some takeaways that might also be, new jobs that you can help to solve also for those employees, so that they're also somewhat satisfied, right? So that's a long-winded way of saying, I think the opportunity is to learn from doing this so that you can, not just sell something that eliminates employees' jobs, but sell something that makes them better because you're actually already help already helped them to get to a better place.
Right. A healthier company
A healthier
benefits the employees.
company, yep, and they could be doing something else, or they're part of a process in a different way, whatever it might be.
Right. Right. Here is one from Brian. This is a long one. Let's see if we can parse this one together here. Thanks, Brian. How does the organization have to change as product companies change focus from product features to solutions for individual customers? Do customer teams need to be part of the strategy development for the customers, as in raising barriers,
Yep.
or even tougher, prospective customers?
Yeah.
How do you maintain unique solutions for different customers with different needs?
Mm.
For example, a software company that has a hard time maintaining unique coding to specific customers.
Yeah.
Did you catch all that, Justin?
I think I did.
Good.
So I'll start at the first ones first. So what I'd say is the answer is yes. You should always, always, always have diverse teams ideating on this stuff and basically co-creating what some imagined future might look like. And I'll go back here, right? This slide. This when I look at this, is we call this the double loop, right? This is one way to sketch out what design processes look like. But in this is not a lone wolf thing. This is about diverse teams doing this, taking this journey together, and not just learning, but building together, co-creating together. The best ideation sessions, optioneering, you call it what you like, that I've ever been a part of are when you have the most diverse teams of people in the same room doing stuff, co-creating new ideas for the future that generally don't even necessarily like being together. That might be salespeople teamed up with the marketers, teamed up with the finance people, teamed up with the legal team, teamed up with the product managers, teamed up with the product marketers, right? And here teamed up with engineers, designers, right? So there's 8 different roles I just called out. And when you think about it, right, we as product managers, we're typically not super happy with the finance people because we don't get what we want all the time. And engineers aren't super happy with us either because we're promising too much, right? And designers are similar, but the marketers, right? The marketers, as marketers, maybe we're marketing the hell out of something, but it's starting to get to the edge of maybe lying or whatever, right? And so we are diametrically opposed to each other when we sit around a boardroom table and we're like, oh man, that's never going to work having this person there. But when you bring all these people in the same room and it's about creating new ideas for the future, it turns out you end up covering an entire spectrum of information that you otherwise wouldn't have, or that you're just assuming you have that you don't, right? So you'd always bring the customer facing people into this because they're best to actually start identifying what needs actually exist. But also, eventually you want to bring your customers in there. I'm not a big proponent of bringing your customers in to ideate because I think they will only ideate over short-term solutions and not long-term things. But you do want to bring your customers in at some point to prototype and validate, and maybe even upfront to understand what their pains and their gains and their jobs are, so that you can do more for them over time. So I think all of that said, you have to bring people in to actually do that. And sorry, what was the last part of this question, Eddie?
The last part was the question about software companies that have a hard time maintaining unique coding for specific customers.
Yes. Okay. I think that's a good one. At some point, you have to make decisions too. In servicing your customers, you've got to make a decision where to focus. So are you going to be, I don't know where you work, but are you going to be a Twilio, for instance, that really is just going to put out a set of services and APIs that anyone can use, and irrespective of the company? And then it just comes down to consulting, some kind of consulting practice on one side or the other, development practices to consume those things and make something of them? Or are you going to be a Medtronic that really focuses on one kind of customer and solving their problems? There are certainly in-betweens, and it's a little bit fuzzier than that. But I do think eventually it comes down to focus. And if you're if you're a software company, then it comes down to focus, and then probably secondary and tertiary focus. And those secondary and tertiary foci, it's probably about APIs, and then consulting teams that are not the product teams, or other SIs or someone else that actually can make something out of what you do, but you as a product company, you're focused on this thing and these customers that are your primary, and maybe a little bit of the secondary. So you're not always customizing everything, because I think customize everything, that's a different business model. That's a consulting business model, and not and not a service business model, like a product as a service business model.
Beautiful. Well, Justin, I am going to wrap us up by asking you one last question. I've dubbed it the RK question, named
Ooh.
after our VP of marketing, Rebecca Calageras, who loves to ask this. Justin, if you were to have our viewers today do two things differently based
Mhm.
on what you've told us about today, what would those two things be?
Yeah, I think the two things you would do differently if you're not doing today is, one would be to bring disparate people together to start building your future, to start designing your future. And there's design in there, so I'm going to say that's 1A. And
Okay.
part B is to start, if you haven't already, to start doing so, building out what your current and future business models look like, not your products, but your business models as part of those products, so that you can find really new opportunities for yourselves, for your customers, for your partners, perhaps ones that don't exist today.
Wonderful. Well said. We did have a few other questions that we didn't get to, and I'm sure that there are even more that weren't even posted yet, but you saw that Justin did invite you to find him on LinkedIn. So I will invite you as well to use him as a resource if he's offering that is invaluable. Find him on LinkedIn, ask even more questions there. It's time for the thank yous portion. A big thank you today to our partner, Product Development Days. Don't forget to check out their event on October 27th through 29th, of which Pragmatic Institute is a platinum partner. And of course, a huge thank you to our presenter today, Justin Lokitz. Fantastic presentation. Everyone, if you were interested in the slides today, the whole presentation will be available on our Pragmatic Institute YouTube channel. So look for it there for a refresher, because there was tons of information to soak in. And everyone out there, thank you for attending.
Thank
Stay
you.
healthy, stay safe, and we will see you again next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Eddie.